Okay, people, let's talk Medicare for all. But before we get to that, I will say that, surprise, surprise, I was able to make 2 podcasts this week. My son is getting glasses, so the kids went with their mother to go pick them up. So I have a few hours, I think, of why does it sound like there's a fucking echo? Can you guys hear this shit? What was I saying? Oh yeah, so I have a few hours or an hour or 2, I don't know. So I figured I'll give you guys another podcast, and this time I want to talk about primarily Medicare for all. Okay, there are lots of people out there that are completely clueless about Medicare for all, and how we'd pay for it, because that's brought up quite often. There was a recent study conducted by the Koch brothers. For those of you that don't know who the Koch brothers are, they're basically these rich, wealthy fucking cunts who, they'd rather shit in your face than ever do anything to benefit somebody that wasn't a millionaire or a billionaire. Okay, so when I say that this study was funded by the Koch brothers, you know that in regards to the findings of that study, you can trust them, right? Because these guys they don't have skin in the game as far as making Medicare for all a real thing or something that happens. In fact, that I'm pretty sure that they would prefer that we never have Medicare for all. So what did they find out in this libertarian study funded by the Koch brothers? Well, what they found out was that in the long run, over a 10-year period, we would actually spend, as a country, $2 trillion less than what we currently pay. Now, if you have seen any sort of headline lately, what you'll see, at least from the mainstream media, is they'll put like, study finds that in order to fund Medicare for all, it's going to cost $32 trillion, right? And they'll leave the headline at that, because most people don't really read beyond that. They say, oh, $32 trillion, that's fucking horrific. That's a lot of fucking money. Until you look into what we spend currently for healthcare, which is $34 trillion. So, for those people out there that aren't fucking, mathematicians, it would be cheaper to spend $32 trillion instead of 34. You see how that works? You paying $2 trillion less. We already spend 34, and I don't mean to talk to the people listening to this podcast like they're stupid. I know that my listeners, or at least I hope that my listeners, are generally pretty knowledgeable. But every now and then, I'll get somebody that not so much, and they kind of need things spelled out for them. I can remember the millions of, not millions, but I don't know, the couple of fucking podcasts where I've shit on like the police or the military, not because I fucking have any disrespect for either of those things. It's just that, there's certain types of people that are attracted to those types of things. And those types of people usually aren't the kinds of people that you'd actually want to be a part of those things. But, I'm not going to get into that. Anytime I've made those podcasts or made those statements, I've always backed it up with, at least with why I feel the way that I do. Okay. So if there's somebody that's listening to this podcast that is part of the, oh, how are we going to pay for it crowd, what I'm telling you is that we would spend less if we had Medicare for all in comparison to not having it. If we don't have it, which is what we have now, we spend $2 trillion more. The math is pretty fucking simple. And even though 2 trillion in comparison to, 34 or whatever, I know, if you just look at the numbers themselves, you're like, well, 34, or 2 trillion isn't as much as 34. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what sort of mental gymnastics you'd have to go through in order to not understand this or to continue down that path of, how can we pay for this? And this is, fucking ponies and fairy dust and whatever it is. I don't know the kind of, mental gymnastics you have to go through in order to, after this study conducted by a libertarian group that's funded by the Koch brothers, which are no friends of the poor and middle class. Like I said, their interests revolve primarily around increasing their own wealth and looking out for their other, fellow yacht driving fucking cunts. Okay. That's why I said that, considering who funded this and the results that were found, I would say that you could take this as a legit, study, even though they did also follow all of the typical guidelines when trying to, conduct a study. They did double blinds. They did what was necessary in order to make their findings legit. And what they found is that over a 10-year period, we're spending $2 trillion less. I just, at this point, anybody that isn't a millionaire or a billionaire, whether you're a Trump supporter or whether you supported Hillary Clinton, I'm not talking to the Bernie supporters because we already fucking knew this shit. We knew this shit years ago. We're already well aware of the benefits of Medicare for all. But for the Trump supporters and the Hillary supporters out there, if you're not a millionaire or a billionaire, then I really don't understand, like what's your issue with Medicare for all? I mean, I don't really understand what your issue is with socialism. At least the kind of socialism that progressives are trying to promote, which is the Scandinavian version of progressivism, of socialism, which is democratic socialism, which is kind of what this country was founded on in the first fucking place. But, for some reason, anytime you talk to, somebody that's a Trump supporter or a Hillary supporter, the first thing they talk about is Venezuela, as though that's the type of socialism that we are promoting. And the thing about that is anytime somebody, that I've gotten into an argument with, when I talk about how, socialism is actually a fucking good thing, the first thing that, the minute they fucking, throw out Venezuela, I already know that I'm just dealing with somebody who has no idea what the fuck they're talking about. And they're just repeating some shit because somebody that they respect fucking said it. Okay. The situation in Venezuela, the reason that their country is so fucked up is because we have spent the last, 40, 50, 60 years, maybe less, I don't know. We've got sanctions on their country. We've invaded them. We've tried everything that we can. We've fucking rigged their elections. We've done everything we can to destabilize that country. And because of what we've done, their country, it's not really a fully developed country at this point. Their country is pretty much a fucking wild, wild west. They're starting to turn it around. But, you can't point to Venezuela and be like, well, see, that's an example of what I don't want to happen. Well, here's the fucking thing. First of all, they're an underdeveloped country. Second of all, the reason that their country is so fucked up is because of us and our pursuit of their oil supply. Because Venezuela, has a significant supply of fucking of natural resources. And I mean, like I said, when progressives are talking about socialism, we're talking about democratic socialism, the sort of socialism that you will find in places like Norway and Sweden and Scandinavia and pretty much every other fucking Western, industrialized fucking, country. They all have Medicare for all. They have fucking 4 to 6 weeks paid vacation for everyone. Not just people that work in a fucking office building. Everyone. So why you're against that, I don't know. Other than I assume that you're just paying attention to fucking talking heads or people that you respect. And because you respect them, you take what they say at face value and do zero fucking research on your own. That's why, you'll find people that will look at this fucking study like, oh, it's going to cost $32 trillion and be like, oh, well, that's fucking, that's insane. Why would I want to spend that fucking much? And what it is basically they have no idea that we were already paying $34 trillion, $2 trillion more. So Medicare for all would mean we pay $2 trillion less. It's simple fucking mathematics. So if you're still arguing against Medicare for all, I have to assume that you are kind of a fucking idiot. And I say that as lovingly as I possibly can. It's time to stop listening to people that have a vested interest in making sure that we don't have the same things that other Western industrialized countries have. And this goes for the people that are defending Obamacare. If you're thinking that Obamacare was fucking awesome, I have to assume that you really don't even understand the ramifications of Obamacare. Yes, it was better than what we had, but it was pretty much a giveaway to the health insurance agencies or companies or industry. Yeah, I think, I don't remember what the number was, 30, 40 million were finally insured after Obamacare, but there's also like 30 or 40 million that weren't. All you have to do is look into the ramifications of what Obamacare actually was, and you'll see that, it was better than what we had, but, we can do a whole lot better, and frankly, hold on a second. I got a fucking text from my son. I guess he's showing me a picture of his glass. It actually looks pretty good. Wow. So handsome. But yeah. The fuck was I talking about? We can do so much better than what we're currently doing. And, the weird thing is you'll have people like, oh, how are we going to pay for these things? The free college, the Medicare for all, the $15 minimum wage, and, whatever else. People love to just throw that out there. But then when it comes time to increase the military budget by billions and I think the last increase was like $700 billion more than what we already were spending. Nobody asked like, oh, where are you going to get the money for that? How are we going to pay for that? Where are we going to find the money? Are we going to have fucking fundraisers? How are we going to? Nobody fucking says that when it comes to the military budget or any other fucking bullshit that, the corporatist fucking Democrats and Republicans want to push. Nobody ever questions it. But when it comes to something that would actually benefit everyone, suddenly it's like, oh, how the fucking purse strings, how can we pay? Oh, if we do pay for that, well, then obviously we have to cut, welfare or food stamps, or, let's cut everything that doesn't involve touching the fucking military budget, which is already fucking beyond bloated. We spend currently, we outspend, I think, like, I want to say it's like, I don't even know. But we spend more on our military than all of the fucking other superpower countries spend on their military budget combined. We spend more than all of them. So technically, we could afford to, I don't know, cut a little bit so that we can actually pay for things like fucking Medicare for all, like, tuition free college, like, solving the fucking, homeless situation, giving people a living wage. We could do all of that, and our military budget would still fucking outweigh every other fucking country on the planet combined. So it drives me up the wall when you have people like, well, how are we going to pay for it? And then when they just read headlines like, oh, Medicare for all is only going to cost 32, or it's going to cost 32 trillion. It's like, oh, holy fuck, that's a large number. But you're completely unaware that we now currently spend 34 trillion. If all you did was look at the fucking headline and do no fucking research whatsoever, even superficial research, then yeah, 32 trillion sounds fucking horrific. It sounds like, oh, holy shit. There's going to be all these fucking tax increases and there's going to have to be, cuts to social no, none of that is fucking necessary. In fact, it gives us a $2 trillion fucking surplus to spend on things like, I don't know, our infrastructure, which in turn would create fucking jobs. These are all things that are all very fucking possible, but the only reason they don't happen is because they've convinced, the average Trump supporter or the average fucking Hillary supporter into thinking that, no, having shit that other fucking countries are not even close to as wealthy as our country are, no, we can't have that because of some fucking reason. So yeah, so that's my take on Medicare for all. If after this point you are still against it, then I don't know what to fucking tell you. You're at this point, if you're still against it, if you're against saving $2 trillion, it's either one of two things, or maybe it's one of three. Either A, you're racist and your thought process is, I don't want people that I fucking hate to be able to have healthcare, which is by far the stupidest fucking reason to be against it that I can think of, because you are basically cutting off your nose to spite your face. The other reason is that you're just a fucking moron, and the third reason is that you are in fact a millionaire, trillionaire, And of course it doesn't benefit you. I mean, it even has benefits to, if you're just going to look, I was watching, Jimmy Dore. So, before anybody thinks that I'm fucking just taking his material or whatever, I was watching one of his videos about this current study. And one of the things they talked about is that if you looked at it if you took out the moral side of the Medicare for all thing and just looked at it purely from a capitalist perspective, it's actually a benefit to corporations to do this, because currently they have to, on top of paying wages, they have to also pay for insurance. But if we have Medicare for all, they don't have to pay for that, which means that they can take those funds and, increase production, expand, put it in their fucking pocket, go buy a fucking yacht. I don't know. It makes sense from that, from that standpoint. If you can just fucking, stop looking at it like, oh, these fucking hippies just want shit for free. If you can stop looking at it that way, because first of all, it's fucking stupid. Second of all, it shows that you really are kind of a fucking sociopath, fucking evil fuck. And it also is just, I don't know. Any perspective that you look at it from, aside from if you happen to be, I don't know, a health insurance company, because obviously it hurts your profits. It will hurt you because you'll no longer be fucking necessary. But you know what? I'm okay with that. I'm okay with the fucking health insurance industry fucking disappearing and no longer, being a part of our fucking society, because these are the same fucking cunts that will deny services because you've had a pre-existing condition, or because they feel like, well, the money just wouldn't be, it wouldn't be beneficial for them to spend the money on that fucking life-saving operation that you need, because, technically you're about to die anyway. So, that's one industry where I think we can all agree they can go fuck themselves. It doesn't mean, even with Medicare for all, it doesn't mean that they'll disappear. They just won't play a relevant part in determining fucking American healthcare. They just won't play a part. Currently, they play the biggest fucking part. Obamacare was basically just a huge giveaway to the health insurance industry. I'm okay with them falling by the fucking wayside, but what I'm not okay is with people fucking going bankrupt because they caught a case of the fucking sniffles, which is the current situation now. I'm not okay with people that aren't fucking doctors making decisions about whether or not you should be able to get a life-saving fucking procedure. I'm not okay with that. And why you're okay with that, I don't fucking know. Which brings me back to you're either one of three fucking types of people. You're either a fucking racist dipshit who will shoot yourself in the foot just so somebody else won't get some shit. 2, you're a fucking moron to an unbelievable fucking level. Or 3, you are a fucking health insurance agency or company fucking corporate head. And of course, Medicare for all would mean that your fucking profits would hurt. It's fucking insane. So anybody at this point that's still, still isn't on board with it, I don't know. You got to explain to me why you're not. I have to assume there is no fourth reason that you could not be that way or not be on board for it. I think I've got it covered with either racist fucking cunt, dipshit, or yacht owning fucking twat. But, it's just me. I don't know. If you disagree, if you can give me a good fucking reason why, why Medicare for all, even after knowing all of this, is still a bad idea, I would love to fucking hear it. I would love to hear. I'll read your response on my podcast. And if it makes any fucking sense, then I will retract everything I've said, and I will 100% adopt your perspective on these things. I don't know. Balls in your fucking court. Oh, God. What else? Or do I want to end it there? I don't know. It's a quick little fucking podcast. I didn't say it was going to be my normal one. I think that's actually a good, it's a good fucking segment. Maybe I should start considering just focusing on one fucking topic for these podcasts instead of jumping around into a million different fucking directions, and it ends up being just me babbling, kind of like what I'm doing now. So yeah, I'm gonna end it here. That was I know it wasn't that funny or funny at all. I get it, but I feel like I don't get why people are still fucking against it. I don't. I don't get why people that that have that are in the middle class or just barely living check to check, and that have kids that one day, or maybe are about to enter, college, why you would be against tuition-free college. I don't fucking get that. I get why people that grew up, during the from the 60s to almost up to the 80s, because college was free. Well, I mean, college was free around I think from the 40s, 50s, whatever. But even the people that, not necessarily that grew up in the 50s or 60s, people that are, what were they? Generation X? No, it wasn't even Generation X. It was baby boomers or whatever, right? That, I get why they're I fucking worked a bunch of jobs and I still managed to put myself through fucking college. Well, yeah, that worked because the cost of fucking living wasn't as high as it is now. That's how that shit works. That is not a fucking valid argument. The I did it during my time when shit was cheaper fucking argument does not work. This isn't a case of people being lazy. This is a case of people not being able to fucking afford to eat. This is a case of people deciding between, do I fucking have food in my stomach, or do I, do I take medication that'll fucking keep me alive? This isn't a case of, well, I don't want to fucking work a second job, or I want to eat fucking avocado toast or whatever fucking horseshit. This isn't that. What it is the cost of living has skyrocketed. And that includes the cost of going to fucking college. It was cheaper. It was 1,000,000 times fucking cheaper. So the only reason that you're against, say, tuition-free college is because you're a cunt. You can tell yourself whatever you want to fucking tell yourself, but the reality is you're a cunt. Because you're refusing to even accept that, maybe it was fucking easier during your time. It didn't feel like it was easier. To you, it probably felt like you were fucking struggling. Maybe you had to eat ramen noodle, more times than you fucking want to. But you still had it 1,000,000 times easier or better than millennials have it now. And the problem is millennials are paying for your fucking mistakes, for your policy positions. Maybe not you specifically listening to this podcast, but people in your fucking generation. They're paying for your fucking greed. This isn't a case of people are fucking lazy. It's a case of just not being able to afford to fucking live. You know. But anyway, before I go off on another tangent, I was trying to wrap this up. But, you know, at this point, if you're against any of these fucking things, you know, you're either a cunt, a racist, or a fucking yacht-owning twat. And that's all I have to fucking say. I hope you guys have or are having a good week. It is Thursday. So, you know, you got one more day after this, and then you got the weekend. I hope you have a good fucking weekend. And, you know, I'll talk to you again sometime next week. I don't know which day, and I'm pretty sure I'm not going to be able to give you 2 podcasts, but I will be able to give you at least 1. All right? All right. I will talk to you again next time. Fucking, don't take any shit, and go fuck yourself. Peace.